awakened with a migraine headache. Migraines I've suffered from since the time I was 10 years old. When my mouth couldn't scream, my mind did. I've been triggered all week, and I'm sure most of us have been. So I believe in always foregrounding everything that I say in the name of my ancestors. So I'm not going to pour water, but instead I will pour words. The first quote comes from Toni K. Bambara, Black feminist, writer, cultural worker, activist, whose life was cut too short in 1995. And she said, I start with the recognition that we are at war, and that war is not simply a hot debate between a capitalist camp and a socialist camp over which economic, political, social arrangement will have hegemony in the world. It's not just a battle over truth and who has the right to utilize resources for whomsoever's benefit. The war is also being fought over the truth. What is the truth about human nature, about the human potential? My responsibility to myself, my family, and the human family is to try to tell the truth. That ain't easy. We have rarely been encouraged and equipped to appreciate the fact that the truth works and that it releases the spirit, and it is a joyous thing. We live in a part of the world, for example, that equates criticism with assault, that equates social responsibility with naive idealism, that defines the unrelenting pursuit of knowledge and wisdom as fanaticism. Close quote. The next quote I will open with is Audre Lorde, Black feminist, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, and she said, we can learn to work and speak when we are afraid, in the same way we have learned to work and speak when we are tired. For we have been socialized to respect fear more than our own needs for language and definition. And while we wait in silence for the final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us. So today, we are unloosing our tongues and breaking our silences about sexual violence, about all forms of violence that are committed against us, committed against this occupied land, committed since 1492. And not only in America, that we know, but from the top of Alaska all the way down to Argentina. These countries since 1492 have been founded on theft of land, theft of people, rape, genocide. So when we are talking about holding people accountable in these so-called halls of justice, we must remember that there's never been justice. This country has been founded on lies. That does not mean that we don't seek accountability, but we cannot always look to the halls of quote-unquote justice when we understand that a part of the law was ownership, was rape of us, our ancestors, of this land, of the indigenous people. So that we have to think about new ways. We have to envision, as my sister Walida and Marisha said, when we have to be speculative with our fiction. We have to remember how our ancestors said, someday we will be free. There are people in 1600 who said, someday we will be free. So we have to envision that someday we will not have rape, and we've got to work towards eradicating rape. And rape is not just our physical bodies. Rape is what we're doing to the land, what we're doing to the water in Flint, Michigan, and the reservation. We got to make the links. We got to think about what does it mean to put people in cages. And let me be clear, I think that people have to be held accountable, but cages do not make people held accountable. If jail stopped rape, rape would have ended. So we have to figure out ways of how do we hold people accountable. And I stand here as a Black feminist lesbian who was raped at 19, who was molested for multiple years from the time of 10 and 12. Okay, and they were all men of color. So while I have a hardcore critique of white supremacist patriarchy, we got to talk about what's happening within our communities. We got to talk about how we are treating each other, how we draw lines between each other. Oh, well, I'm not this, I'm not that. We have to have awareness about our trans sisters and brothers, about our gender non-conforming people. We got to be committed to the eradication of rape of all humans, all humans. So that is really, really critical, because no one is free while anyone is oppressed. We must remember that. And so while we fight at the polls, and be clear, it is important to fight for radical and elect radical and progressive officials, but we have got to hold them accountable. We've got to, it's not just voting. We got to hold them accountable. Remember that they work for us. We do not work for them. So we have to take note and hold them accountable and understand that there's so much money behind so many campaigns, that these politicians are accountable to corporations. We got to remind them that they're accountable to us. And while we're doing that, then we got to do the work in our communities. We got to have these conversations, difficult conversations about child sexual abuse, about rape, about domestic violence, in our families, in our communities, in our radical movements. I'm the daughter of a civil rights activist who was sexually assaulted during the Mississippi Freedom Summer by a SNCC comrade in Mississippi. So we got to understand that sexual violence is everywhere. We got to understand that. And that does not mean, therefore, that we we look a different way. I don't want to say blind eye because that's ableist language. We look the other way in the name of racial solidarity. We don't have to call the police, but we have to think about ways in which we are holding folks accountable. So I think it's really important that we support our survivors, that we also challenge our harm doers and our bystanders. It's not just the person who's caused the harm, it's also those of us who allow it to happen. Bill Cosby didn't happen in a vacuum. He couldn't have done what he did without NBC, without his agents. He didn't do this alone. So yes, I'm glad he's held accountable, but let's hold all these others accountable. R. Kelly didn't do this by himself. Let's hold these companies accountable. So it's not just mute R. Kelly, let's mute RCA. Let's say we will not support you if you continue to support rapists. And it's not just R. Kelly, it's not just Bill Cosby, there's so many. Let's not wait till it is a serial attack. One is too much, one. So again, I end with, no one is free while others are oppressed. No one is free while others are oppressed. Break the silence in violence.
Yes, y'all give it up one more time for Aishah. Break the silence, good folks. We still doing all right out there. Y'all looking good still. Y'all looking